Have you ever wondered what it truly means to master your mindset? We hear this word everywhere. Mindset this, mindset that. But what does it actually mean? Is it your thoughts, or is there something deeper at play? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton, and I help high achievers who feel stuck bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Traditional self-help doesn't work because it's either too rigid, too generic, or too overwhelming. My approach is different. I simplify change by making it so easy that it can't not happen. Using my easier framework, I help you create habits, routines, and behaviors that stick, so you can stop struggling and start thriving. It's that easy. In today's episode, we're tackling the big question. How do you take control of your thoughts and shift your perceptions in a way that actually changes your actions and ultimately your life? If you've ever felt stuck, frustrated, or like no matter how much effort you put in, something's always holding you back, then this episode is for you. Because the truth is, these stories you tell yourself shape everything, from your confidence to your success, even your happiness. And if you don't become aware of those stories, you end up living by a default instead of by design. And to help us unpack this, I'm joined by mindset coach and transformation expert, Carly Pepin. Carly specializes in helping people identify the subconscious stories that keep them stuck, and she teaches them how to shift their perceptions to create real, lasting change. She has worked with countless individuals to break through the mental roadblocks, redefine their identities, and take action with confidence. So if you've ever struggled with things like imposter syndrome, or you've compared yourself to others and felt like your past experiences were holding you back, then keep listening. Mastering your mindset isn't about having total control over your thoughts. It's about learning how you can interpret them in a way that empowers you instead of limits you. In this episode, we explore why so many of us get caught in thought patterns that don't serve us, how shifting your perception can instantly change your actions, and why understanding your deeper motivations is the key to making change stick. Plus, Carly shares some real-life examples of how people have completely transformed their lives simply by reframing their stories. So if you're ready to start thinking differently and making change easier, let's dive in. What does it mean to master your mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question, Paul. It's a good one. Okay. So when we think about our mindset, it technically has many thoughts going on a regular basis, but understanding how to master it doesn't mean that we're going to have full control all the time. We're not ever going to be able to have full control over what's going on in our head. If we actually just sit there as an observer, we realize how much we're thinking, how many thoughts we're processing on a regular basis. But the true mastery behind it is understanding how to actually read what's going on in your mind. Because we all have stories that we tell ourselves, some that are true, some that are not true, but especially the ones that are inaccurate. When we run those stories, it's wisdom to learn how to catch them, how to understand them, how to know how to define them, refine them, and then also how to transform them. So mastering our mindset isn't just being the observer and understanding what's going on in the mind and why we have fantasies, why we have nightmares, why those are coming up in this particular moment. But also once we get the details and those specific details of why they're occurring, how to then transform them. And this is a lifetime process. It's something that we get to do for the rest of our lives. So also just not having the unrealistic expectations that we're going to wake up one day and have mastery over our mindset and be enlightened and be done. It's just not how it works. But dedicating ourselves to being able to refine that on a regular basis gives us the opportunity to understand what's happening in the moment to a greater degree so that we can actually empower ourselves to create the life that we want, utilizing our mindset, which is quite inspiring. It's a powerful tool. It's a really powerful tool.
I love that. You're spitting fire right out of the gate. You talk fast. I feel like I'm talking to myself now. Everyone says I talk really fast, and I'm like, I just have a lot of stuff to say. I got a lot to get out. So I'm curious though, mindset specifically is one of those words that is out there now. Everyone talks about mindset. It's mindset. It's all mindset. Everything is mindset. But what does it actually mean? Is it just our thoughts? Is it something deeper? Is it something separate or the same? Like, how do you define it?
Yeah, when we think about mindset, I kind of like to, I mean, I generally like to utilize it how the world is utilizing it just because I want to help and speak a common language, right? So we think about it, and it's our thoughts, the things that are happening within our mind, the thoughts that we're having, and how we're actually interpreting them. So if I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror and that day I say, I'm stupid or I'm ugly, then that is the mindset that I have for the day. Those are the thoughts that I'm having, and how I'm interpreting them is the real component, and that is what I'm perceiving in that moment. Our perception aligns with the thought that we're having. And depending on what our perception is, will give us the mindset we have for the day. So if I wake up with that perception and I'm clicking and I'm attaching to whatever that thought is, then what's going to happen is my mindset for the day. And by the way, I've had this before. We all have body dysmorphia. Because I would just like every time I walked by like a window, I'd look and I'd be like, "Am I still ugly?" And it's, oh my god, I'm not as bad as I thought, right? So that was the thought that I had in the morning. My perception agreed with that thought, and therefore that was the mindset that I took on for the day. So it's a really great example of how we can actually attach to these thoughts, these perceptions, and then have that mindset for the day. And as a result of having this perception, which is a misperception. Everyone on this planet has days that they look really great, and everyone on this planet has days when they don't. Like, we all have every single side. Like, no person is like beautiful 100, like every 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like, we all have our moments, and we all have moments of being unattractive, and we have moments of being attractive. And then there's people out there who will think I'm incredibly attractive, and other people who are like, girl, you're not my type at all. So that's the reality. But if I latch onto one side, then that's the perception that I'm latching onto the thought that's creating that mindset for the day. So the second I shift that perception, what's really cool is it takes away that subconscious control of your actual physical actions. So if I'm not thinking and waking up and attaching to that thought that I'm just an ugly person, and I'm just like, well, girl, you just woke up. Like, you're a little bit wrecked. You're a little bit tired. You stayed up too late. Of course you look a little bit off. And then all of a sudden, my mindset doesn't attach to that for the day. That doesn't become my mindset for the day, which means every time I walk by that window, I don't have to look, right? Every time I walk by a mirror, I don't have to look. And all of a sudden my actions change, and it no longer controls me. So when we think about mindset, and when we say we want to empower our mindset so that we can overcome these misperceptions and these thoughts, this is kind of a clear example of how those misperceptions that create those daily mindsets are actually controlling our actions. And when we shift those perceptions to see the truth, we actually shift our actions naturally as well, which is really cool. And that's the empowerment component when we empower our mindset.
You mentioned just at the end there, as you start to shift these perceptions and we shift our mindset, those shift the actions. This is one of those things that I hear a lot of people talk about and flip it, and will say that, well, the way that you change is you start by changing your actions first. Right? We don't always feel motivated. You get up and you go, and then you feel motivated. So to me, it's a circle. Your actions drive your beliefs drives your actions. It's an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But how do we break into that cycle? Is there one way that fits all the time? And how do we know which is the place to start?
Yeah, and this is a great question, because there are some things where we just wake up and we can shift our actions and call it a day, and it works. And when we can't just wake up and shift those actions, when the resistance, the struggle seems too challenging or too hard, that's when we start to work on the perceptions. Because it's, man, I just keep trying everything and I'm still doing the same thing. I'm trying so hard, I can't shift it. And that's when we start to see what's going on in the perceptions. So even I was working with an individual, and they were frustrated because they were an artist, but they weren't doing their art, right? So they're not doing their art. And every day they're waking up and they're trying to take that action. And so when we shifted the perception around what art looked like, what it had to look like, as opposed to what they wanted it to be, guess what happened? Then they started to wake up and do their art in their own form. I didn't have to remind them. I just shifted their perception because they had compared themselves. Imposter syndrome came in. They thought art should be a certain way. Art needs to look a certain way. And when we got the imposter syndrome out of their head, when we get that out of their head, guess what they do? They start to take action naturally in the way that the art is meant to come forward in their unique form.
Hey, real quick, we'll be back to the show in just a few seconds, but right now I have to ask you for a huge favor. If you're getting value out of this episode so far, take 2 seconds and share it with a friend. I mean, right now, literally, hit the little share button and send it in a text to your roommate or your cousin or your mom or your brother or your sister. Seriously, spread the love. If you like what you're hearing, then that's the best way that you can show support for this show. Because maybe you're like Eliza Kay, who said, "This podcast is both warm and inviting, but real enough to push and motivate me." Or you're like Dalton, who said, "Paul is an amazing host, and his podcast is a must listen." Don't you want to share this awesomeness with your friends and family? Don't be a gatekeeper. It only takes a second. It helps me grow and reach a new audience, and you seem like a genius friend who recommends new, awesome podcasts. We all win. All right, go send that text. And now, let's get back to the show.
And so sometimes if we're pushing really hard to do something or get something done, but we're not actually taking that action, then it's really time to look at what's going on inside. Because there's a million ways to get to Rome. All roads lead to Rome. And I love that statement because it is true. And there's so many different things that we can try and we can utilize on this planet. We don't have to focus on one, but if one's not working, it's okay, well, what's the one that works for my specific problem? And I just love mindset. So I focus on that one to the greatest degree. So one of my favorite things is our perceptual shifts, transformations, and understanding why things occur. So when we can actually see the moments that all this other stuff isn't working, it's okay, let's go within. Now it's time to go within, and then we can move forward from there. It's really inspiring. There's a lot of cool ways out there to do things, but yeah, if everything else isn't working, it's, well, something must be coming from within, and then we work on the inside.
Yeah, I had a guest on a couple of months back. His name was Dr. Benjamin Ritter, and he had a good quote, which was just, don't do the inner work unless you have to, right? Like the inner work is hard, and there's a reason that we come to this last. If you could get where you need to go simply by taking action, sometimes that's good enough. Like you said, if you can just get out of bed and do the thing, then that's great. But sometimes you have to do that deep work, but it doesn't mean that that's what we have to do all the time for everything. Everything doesn't have to be about breaking down your traumas and unliving your childhood, this, that, and the other thing. So I think that there's value in both sides. But as you're talking about perception, interpretation, a lot of this comes from something you mentioned right in the beginning, which is stories. So how do we start to control the stories in our head and use them to our advantage?
Yeah. Well, first, we don't want to control them. Anything we try to control is going to get out of control. So you'll see it. It's like the law of heuristic escalation. So we'll try to control something. We'll try to impose our rules on something. And then all of a sudden it becomes the exact opposite. And anyone who has kids knows exactly what I'm talking about. The more we try to impose one thing, all of a sudden they're doing exactly what we don't want them to do. So what we want to do is we want to connect with it. We want to communicate with that story, and we want to understand it to a greater degree, because that story also serves a purpose in your life. And this is kind of cool because this is where personal development comes in. It's really important to know yourself. It's really important to know yourself. It's easier to wake up and take action every day if you understand who you are. I'm going to say that, yeah, that's probably one of the most important things that you can do for yourself, is take a deep dive onto what you want to do on this planet, what you're here for, and why, your bigger why. And it's funny because we think of it as a nebulous thing, but it's really not nebulous. It's in front of our face the whole time. So the more that we understand and refine that, the more that we understand our stories. And some of our stories come through because they give us something that actually serves us. I was working with an individual, and they have a stuttering challenge, and we identified where it originated from. We identified where and how we could transform it, and then I never heard from them again. And when I started researching them and their business, I realized that they are making a significant quantity of income off of utilizing that story. And so for me to take that away and actually heal and cure that component, and we could actually help them get to the other side, would be detrimental to their business. And so partly, sometimes that story serves us, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. That story is giving people a significant quantity of empowerment and helping them to understand that no matter what's going on with you, you could become the person that you want to be, right? So sometimes when we can get past that judgment, we realize why we're holding on to a story, why we're holding on to a challenge, and we can love and appreciate ourselves because it's actually serving a purpose, right? We are not purposeless human beings. Even the challenges that we go through and the things that we're frustrated and we want to get rid of are in our lives for a reason. When we realize that, we appreciate it. And it's funny because that's where the true transformation can come from. There's also times where I've worked with people and they want to transform that. They go through the challenge and they shift things and they change things and they uproot their life because it's genuinely something that's important to them, because they love the transformation more than the other thing that they're getting. And this all depends on life purpose, right? No person is right and no person is wrong. If that person has a higher value on their business, their finances, the message that they're sharing, they can stay there, and that's the perfect spot for them to stay. But if you have a higher value on the personal development and overcoming it, then you're probably going to go through the challenge of reframing your business, refocusing, and going through that one just because you want to get to that other hump. If you want to get over that hump and get to the other side, right? So it's really cool. Because when you know yourself, you can ask yourself the questions of this story right now. How's that actually helping me to grow? How, by holding on to this story, has it given me what I want? Because until you can't understand the story, how are you supposed to transform it? And when you can actually appreciate the story and what it's giving you, it gives you the opportunity to actually look at it and say, hey, is this a story I want to transform? And I don't actually need to hold on to it, but I know why it's there and I know why it exists. So I'm going to let it hang out with me because it's giving me so many important things. Or, you know what, I'm ready to overcome this. But now that I understand it, I also understand where it's coming from, right? And it could be something from your past. It could be something from your past, from childhood. It could even be something from the present. Sometimes we think everything comes from the past, but it does in a certain sense, but it also doesn't have to go that far back. Sometimes some of our most traumatizing experiences could have happened last week. You just never know what someone went through. So understanding the story and asking it questions as opposed to being like, I need to get you out of my life. You're a bad thing. Whenever we see it as a bad thing, we're not going to ask it quality questions. We're not going to ask ourselves quality questions to find out what's really going on. Because sometimes the story is perfect for us. And sometimes it's time for it to transform and shift. But this is the cool part of knowing ourselves, to be able to grow ourselves and help ourselves get to the other side in the perfect way for us.
How do you see us as individuals, you, me, someone you work with, as being complacent in keeping ourselves stuck?
Yeah, and this is it. Sometimes there's a complacency because we're getting so much value out of it, right? So I was working with an individual that are going through divorce, right? And they're not moving forward on their business. But the reality is when we got down to the crux of it, they're so frustrated, judging themselves so much for not moving forward on their business. When we get down to the crux of it, we realize the more money they make now, the more money they lose, and it's okay, cool. So when do you want to start it? And they're like, I think I got a couple months left. Okay, great. Perfect. What we don't realize is we label ourselves as stuck. And again, if you're not seeing how that stuckness serves and why you're doing it, you're not really appreciating the strategy behind it. I was working with another individual who was really stuck on moving forward in relationships, still living with a parent. And when I asked them how that's serving them, they had disconnected from their parent for decades. And this was the opportunity and finally the chance to get to know one of their parents again. And it's okay. So are you really stuck in relationships, or did you just kind of put this one on hold to a certain degree because this one was so valuable to you and you finally got it back? So again, we're labeling stuck. And when we label that, it actually slows down the process. So that person can sit there and judge themselves forever, thinking they need to do something or should do something and focused on trying to fix themselves in this other area of life. Or they can love and appreciate their strategy to reconnect with the parent. And when they do, they stop focusing on all this other junk and put their energy where they initially wanted it to. So even that component of, are you stuck? Well, why are you stuck? And where are you stuck? Let's get that goal fulfilled that you're trying to get fulfilled, because it might happen quicker than you think. And sometimes when we figure out that strategy of being stuck, it's, this is something that you could do what you want plus this goal, and it's, let's do both side by side. And so that also comes up as well, even just working again with an individual and he's feeling stuck in building his own career and his own voice. And it was funny because again, there was one project that he wanted to finish, and now that project is finished, he's running this other project concurrently with another one, right? And so he could do both at the same time, but at first his brain's I can't do it all. So the funny thing is we consistently have this label of being stuck. But unless you can find out why you're stuck, again, give yourself permission to love and appreciate yourself enough to understand why you're stuck, what you're doing, what you're trying to get out of it, because how am I supposed to transform it unless I know what you want? One more fun story, because there was an individual who perceived that they were stuck. And they're stuck in the sense where they're like, oh, like I can't move forward and I'm not like doing what I want in business and stuff. Well, they couldn't see how building a business was going to help their spirituality. And when they saw the level of service that they could provide to others and how much they could give to others, and they realized that without that business, the service, the impact that they were having was quite small, right? When they finally had that realization, that's when they started to launch forward on building their company and building their brand and building their career. So sometimes it's, oh, I don't want to give that up, because if I do, I'm going to lose the very thing that's making me stuck. I'm going to lose something that's so important. So until we can see that, I can't ask the questions to be able to show you how you're going to get it in this new form that you want to transform it to, right? So first things first, love and appreciate yourself. Find out why you're stuck. Appreciate why you're stuck, so you could see how the thing that you'd love to get into is going to give you what you really want and why you're staying where you're at. And once you can see that, you'll skyrocket. You'll do it naturally. I don't need to call you. I don't need to motivate you. I don't need to do check-ins. You'll just do it. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's super interesting. You said there, one of those examples that, you were working with a gentleman who perceived that he was stuck, and that goes back to everything we've been talking about already. It is a perception. Are you actually stuck? Is that a story that you're being told or that you're telling yourself? And then if you are stuck, why? What is the benefit of that? Because everything that we do happens for a reason. Everything that we have chosen at some regard. And that's something that is hard for people to wrestle with a lot of times, where it's like everything you have is exactly what you want, and everything you want is exactly what you have, because if you didn't want that, you wouldn't, and if you do, then you did. But when we talk about all of this stuff, it's so complex to say, because even what I just said, so I know a lot of people are just be like, well, no, don't, I don't want this. I have to have X, Y, and Z. And whenever we talk about human behavior, everything is so complicated and hard. That's the whole point of this podcast, Change Made Easy. How do we change our behaviors? How do we make it easier? So my question then is, why is it that these things are so challenging? Like human behavior, shouldn't that be the simplest things? I am human. Shouldn't I be able to just be? Why is it that we get so mixed up in all of this stuff?
Yeah, this is a great question. We get caught up in comparing ourselves to other individuals, other people. And what we'll wind up doing is you'll be really clear, right? You'll sit here and remember a moment in your life where you were really clear on exactly what you wanted and exactly where you wanted to go. And then you told someone that you admired, you're excited to talk to them about it, one person, many people, and all of a sudden they gave you feedback. Right? Feedback that you weren't expecting. And in your brain, you're like, am I doing it right? Is this the right way to go? Is this the right path? And you start questioning yourself. And you're like, well, they're right. This person did do it better. This person knows more than me. Maybe I don't know enough. Maybe I'm not ready. And all of a sudden, all the noise starts to come in the brain. The questioning of ourselves, the lack of understanding of ourselves. And then we look at that thing that we were so certain on before and we're like, I don't know. Now I just don't know. Now I don't know what to do. And I'm confused and I'm stuck. Right? So every time we compare ourselves to someone, we actually discount ourselves, right? We perceive that they have something that we don't, and therefore we're basically disowning that part of ourselves, and we disconnect from our own unique genius, and we think we're supposed to be like someone else. So the human behavior component is oftentimes I'm just identifying who we're comparing ourselves to. Who are you shoulding yourself? According to who? Supposed to according to who? Need to according to who? And when we look at it, it's okay, let's take that person off a pedestal. There's a level of infatuation and over admiration that you have for that person. We're going to take them off a pedestal. We're going to bring them back into your heart. We're going to help you see them at equal, that nothing's missing inside you, and that you can go out and do the very thing that you would love to do. So we really get stuck and we really get confused when we're comparing ourselves to the outside world as opposed to connecting with what we truly want and who we truly are. And every time we look at someone and think they have something I don't, that's when we get stuck. That's when we get disconnected. And if you think about how often we do that, it's quite frequently. It's really quite frequently. And that's why it's so challenging. And that's why things can get so hard. Because sometimes when we get stuck in that comparison, what we do is we'll wake up and we'll try to emulate that person. and we're doing it on a conscious and unconscious level. We'll try to emulate how they have their business. We'll try to emulate how they have their family. We'll try to emulate how they act or behave, right? There's certain times where I've done this work with myself and others where we take someone off a pedestal and your voice changes. You don't realize like how much you're trying to emulate. And I was like, I remember one time when I did it, I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, my voice sounds different. And I thought, holy crap, I felt like I was making my voice sound different. And I felt like I sounded weird. And now I sound normal. It was crazy. And I've had that happen with clients as well. That's how much we're consciously, unconsciously trying to emulate the individuals that we admire and put on a pedestal. And that puts so much noise in our brain because now we're questioning everything we do. And we're trying to be like that other person instead of be like ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. There's so much comparison, the shoulding on ourselves, expectations, supposed to's. I've taught entire courses just on these topics because I think it's so powerful and people can break out of that trap. But on the other side of that, if I am not following the path that's been laid out for me, if I am not emulating someone above me or ahead of me, then it's on me. And I think that a lot of times we then are faced with the feeling of who am I to do this? Who am I to be the person who breaks the mold? And we can struggle with feelings of imposter syndrome. So how does that factor into your whole equation?
Yeah, and this is where that self-reflection component comes in when we talk about emulating. So if you're emulating someone, let's say you're emulating someone because you perceive you don't have what it takes to get things done. So you're going to emulate them because they're better than you, they have more than you, imposter syndrome has set in hard, and you just think like you're infatuated with them, you admire them, they're awesome, you're not. And then you're starting to emulate them. That's something to pay attention to. That's where the shoulds, the have to's, supposed to's, need to come in. And you're going to disconnect from what's important to you. But if you're emulating someone, for example, that's built a business and they write a book and they have a great structural framework in there to help you build a business, and you're emulating them not because you want to be like them, not because they have more than you, but because they have a tool that you can use to help you grow. And as you implement it, you're like, ooh, this works really well, but this part doesn't work. So I'm going to shift it just a little bit. I'm going to shift it. And all of a sudden it flows better in your company, in your business, in your life. And it could be business or it could be like life tools, whatever you love most. Even in relationships, we see this. You read a relationship book, and if you applied everything exactly as is to a relationship book to your relationships, it doesn't work. And what do? You go in and you naturally break the mold. We're born to break the mold because we're not meant to emulate that person exactly how it is. It wouldn't work in our life. We're meant to take what they have, those tools, implement it into our lives and see if something doesn't work to adjust it slightly. And that's how every day we actually break the mold. And so it's funny because when to say, who are you to break the mold? You've been breaking the mold the whole time. You just haven't noticed. So who are you not to continue? You've been doing it your whole life. Every time you take something from someone, put it in your life and make small adjustments, you just broke the mold, my friend. You just keep doing it. So that imposter syndrome again comes in when you look at someone that you think broke the mold better than you did. When you think knows how to break the mold to a greater degree, you've just compared your version to their version, which means you've discounted how many times you've done this in your life. Because when I break it down into that simple of a task, I know that everyone's thinking, yeah, I've done that. I've taken things and I've refined it. I've taken so many things and I've refined it in my life. I've adjusted it because it just didn't work exactly the way it was. That's you breaking the mold. We do it all day, every day. And so again, that imposter syndrome comes in, that comparison, because all of a sudden you saw someone who did it, thought they did it better, and now you're like, well, who am I? Who am I to do that? Well, you've been doing it the whole time. Like, you just forgot. It's like you forgot because you thought their version was better than yours. And so that's why we want to ask ourselves those questions when it's, well, Carly, I should be doing it this way. Should according to who? According to who? It could be a parent. It could be a teacher. It could be a mentor. It could be a family member, a friend. It could be someone out there that really inspires you, that you've read books on, that you watch on the stage, you see them on platforms, TED Talks, stuff like that. And then realize that you have that person on a pedestal. You have an infatuation and over admiration with them, and you've taken their form and said it's better than yours because you've been doing it your whole life. We break the mold our whole life. And so it's, who are you to do do it. It's your natural state. Yeah. Who are you not to continue? It'd be crazy if you stopped. It's your natural state. Every time you cook a meal and you like tweak the recipe, you broke the mold. You do it all day, every day. So it's cool. It's part of it too is when we get that imposter syndrome in, is ask what they have that you think you don't, but break it down into something digestible. Because if I look at someone and I say they have $1 billion and I don't have $1 billion, what does that $1 billion really mean to me? And let's say the $1 billion gives them the opportunity to try and have experiences that most people don't get to have. If I look at my life, I could find where I have plenty of experiences in my life that most people don't get to have. I can look at that. Oh, and then I'm all of a sudden I'm like, I am a billionaire, but I'm a billionaire in my form. And if I compare myself to the person with money, I'm going to think I need it in the form of money, when the truth is I actually appreciate the form that I have it in and the life experiences that I'm having more than their money. If I liked the money, I'd have that money. And this is kind of goes back to what you're saying. If you really wanted it, you would have it in your life. So I know that if I really want to be a billionaire, I'd be a billionaire, but I've been preferring the wealth and that growth in my own form. Like, I love the experiences I have. But again, break it down into those bite-sized pieces, into those bite-sized chunks, something digestible that you can see in your day-to-day life. And all of a sudden you're like, I do have that. I thought that was missing. I just have it in my own form. And then you take them off the pedestal. Imposter syndrome starts to shift and change. You reconnect with yourself. And again, that's where you just get to be you. It's really easy. Yeah. You should stop being confused.
I really appreciate you sharing that reframe, and I wrote that down. You're born to break the mold. I really love that as just a mantra to remind ourselves that, like you said, you're doing it every day. Everything in your life is completely unique. So why couldn't you continue to be? So I really do appreciate you sharing that with me and with the listeners. Carly, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
I would just love for people to just be themselves and just continue to work on that. I would really love, and it's not even like changing people. I don't want people to change. I want them to love and appreciate who they are. I want them to basically see that they're allowed to be challenging and supportive. Like, you're destined to be both sides, and that's okay. You can be loved and appreciated for who you are no matter what, and that starts with you and giving yourself permission to actually go out and create a life that you love, and stop comparing yourself to those outside sources, because every time you compare yourself, you disconnect from who you are. You don't need to be an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos or an Oprah Winfrey to have a fucking phenomenal life. You also can have a phenomenal life if you love being in nature, living somewhere quite isolated and going for walks every day and reading books and connecting with nature, connecting with your family. If that's what truly feeds your soul, find what feeds your soul. I remember there was a story a friend of mine told me about this guy that he got to connect with when he was a kid, who dug ditches for water irrigation. And he was telling him, he goes, you have no idea how important my job is. He goes, I love my job because every day I make sure that everyone in these little towns, they get water. And without me, they would have no water. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's amazing. That's an inspired individual who's fulfilled by their life. Figure out what you're inspired by. Figure out what you're fulfilled by. Nothing's more important than anyone. No person is more important than another person. No job is more important than another job. And go figure out how to contribute to the world in the way that you would love the most, because that is going to be really inspiring and fulfilling to you. Yeah. And you'll wake up every day like making changes because you're like, I want to. I love this. I love what I do. I love my life. And I want to keep making changes to make sure that I keep living this life the way that I love.
Yeah, so well said that the world would be a better place. I love that story about the ditch digger. There's a similar old parable of like three old men. They're all laying bricks or something like that. And they ask the first guy, like, what are you doing? He's just laying brick for some building. And the second guy says, I'm building a cathedral. And then the third guy says, I'm building a cathedral that will last for thousands of years and that millions of people will see and be a part of, and blah, blah, blah. And it's, which one of those people do you think is going to be more motivated and want to complete the task more? So it's all of that is to say, it's not just a positivity, woo-woo mindset thing. It's like, this is literally how you get yourself to show up. You can imagine there's many ditch diggers around the country, around the world for thousands of years. That's an ancient job, and plenty of people were probably thinking that this is the worst thing in the world. This job is horrible, and just dragging their feet. And versus this one gentleman who showed up because he changed his perspective around it. He changed his mindset, and that allowed him to show up with vigor and to do something and to finish each day energized. It's really powerful. So for people listening, again, it's just your perspective. It's just how you interpret the same experience differently than someone else. And my last question for you, Carly, is if you had one action step that listeners could take right now today, as soon as this episode ends, as soon as they take their headphones out, to make whatever change they're trying to make in their life just a little bit easier, what would it be?
Yeah. So look at your life and the change that you want to make and write it down, right? First thing I want you to do is write it down. And I actually just want you to break it down into digestible steps first, because sometimes you just didn't do that. Break it down into multiple steps, and every step that seems too overwhelming and seems like too much, break that step down into multiple steps and keep doing it until you look at it and you say, I can do that today. Okay. And then if you don't actually make the change after that, I want you to look at this goal and ask yourself the question, is this something I thought I should do or something I actually wanted to do? Because if it's something that you thought you should have done, it doesn't mean that you're actually not going to do it. But first, find out who you're comparing yourself to and get really clear on what you want and who you are, because you might still accomplish that goal, but it's time to do it in your own way, right? Or you look at it and you go, I actually don't even want to do this. I want to do this instead. And I can't believe how much I disconnected with myself. So those are the actions. First, break it down, because let's test it. Let's see if it's actually something you want to do. And I know it will be if you break it down into a step so tiny that you could see how you could do it today. Make it easy for yourself. And if it's that easy and you're still not doing it, that's when we connect in and say, hey, is this actually something that I'm truly meant to do? Where's the should coming from? Is there things to adjust in my goal so I make it more aligned with me? Or is this something that I actually completely drop and focus on what I'd love to do instead? I'd love for you guys to do that. That would be an amazing action step to give yourself permission to move forward into a life that inspires you.
Before you go, I just have to ask you for a huge favor. If you enjoyed or got value from this episode at all, then take a moment and leave a rating and review in the podcast app that you're listening or watching on. If you like the show and you want me to continue to create more episodes and be able to get awesome guests that will help make changing your life easier, then this is the best way you can show support. You can leave a 5-star review on iTunes like Eliza K, who said, this podcast is both warm and inviting, but real enough to push and motivate me. Thank you, Eliza. Or you can be like Dalton, who said, Paul is an amazing host and his podcast is a must listen. Thank you, Dalton. And thank you to all of the over 100 people who have taken the time to rate and review this show 5 stars on iTunes, or the dozens who have left 5-star reviews on Spotify. It only takes a minute, and it helps me grow, it helps me reach a new audience, and it lets me know that this is helping someone, which just feels good. All you have to do is go to the show page of whatever app you're listening to and hit the little 5 stars. Or go to the comments section on YouTube and boom, that's it. And if you really want to show love, take a screenshot when you do it and tag me in your stories on social media at Change Made Easy, and I'll shout you out in an upcoming episode. All right, go leave that rating, and I'll see you back here every Tuesday and Thursday with new episodes of Change Made Easy.